Welcome to Karen Universe, where we dive into every wild, quirky, and intriguing story out there. They told me I could not use my Snowplow, so I walked away. But now a deadly blizzard has trapped their school bus. What happens when the same people who banded my help desperately need it? You all want to hear this because no one saw what came next.
The snow started falling like a warning, thick and silent, the kind that turns roads into graves and small mistakes into headlines. I watched it through my front window while my phone buzzed with a message from the HOA president. Your snowplow violates community appearance standards. Do not use it on association property. I stared at the screen, then at the white wall building outside, and felt something inside me snap. For 3 winters, I had cleared these streets before sunrise, unpaid, just to keep parents safe and kids on schedule. That morning, I shut off the engine, unhooked the plow, and walked back inside. By noon, the storm had teeth. Wind howled between the houses like it was searching for victims. Neighbors sent panicked texts asking why the road was still buried. I didn't answer. I wasn't angry anymore, I was obedient. The rule was clear: no plow, no help. I made coffee and watched snow swallow the mailbox. An hour later, sirens wailed somewhere far off. Then the real call came. A school bus had tried to turn onto our street and slid sideways into a drift taller than its wheels. Children were trapped inside, heater failing, traffic frozen in every direction. I could see flashing lights at the end of the block, tiny and helpless in the storm. My phone rang again, same number, different tone. We need you, the president said, voice shaking. Just this once, please. I looked at the snowplow leaning against my garage wall, banned by a line in a rulebook written by people who never touched a shovel. I thought about the parents who had waved at me last winter. I thought about the meeting where they voted against me without even asking why I plowed. Outside, the wind screamed. Inside, my decision formed like ice. I opened the garage door and felt the cold rush in. The storm didn't care about bylaws or pride. It only cared about gravity and time. Somewhere down the street, a bus full of children waited for someone to break a rule. Snow piled against my boots as I stepped outside, each crunch sounding louder than the wind in my ears. I imagined the bus windows fogging, small faces pressed to glass, teachers counting minutes instead of students. The HOA rulebook suddenly felt very thin compared to the weight of that picture. I tightened my coat, grabbed the keys, and felt the choice lock into place like a gear engaging. Every step toward the truck felt like walking away from fear and straight into consequence. But some roads demand courage more than permission. And I knew then. What happened next changed the neighborhood forever, and it started with one man choosing between permission and responsibility. I started the engine and the truck shuddered awake, headlights cutting 2 pale tunnels through the storm. Snow hammered the hood like thrown gravel as I eased onto the buried street. Every house looked the same, rooflines erased, driveways vanished. I lowered the plow and felt the blade bite into the drift with a dull, stubborn scrape. Progress was slow. The snow was heavy, wet, and packed by wind into ridges that fought back. I pushed 10 feet, reversed, and pushed again, carving a narrow path where none existed. My phone kept lighting up on the seat beside me. Missed calls, messages stacking like the snow outside. I ignored them and focused on the road. Halfway down the block, I saw the bus. It was tilted at an angle, nose buried in a mound, hazard lights blinking weakly through the white blur. A police cruiser sat behind it, wheels spinning uselessly. A man in a bright jacket waved when he saw me, his relief visible even through the storm. I rolled down the window and cold air exploded inside. "You the plow guy," he shouted. I said. Before the rules changed. He didn't argue. He just pointed. "Kids are freezing. We can't move it." I nodded and lined up the blade with the drift in front of the bus. The first push sent snow curling up like a breaking wave. The second cleared the front wheels. On the third, the bus rocked free with a groan of metal and rubber. A cheer rose from inside the bus, faint but real. I caught a glimpse of small faces at the windows, eyes wide, breath fogging the glass. The driver gave me a thumbs up, and slowly, Carefully, the bus began to crawl forward. Behind me, someone clapped. Then another. Neighbors were stepping out of their houses, bundled and blinking, watching as if the storm had produced a miracle instead of a mess. When the bus finally turned and disappeared into the white, the street felt suddenly quiet. The police officer walked over and shook my hand through thick gloves. "Good thing you ignored the paperwork," he said. I didn't answer. I looked back at my house, at the garage door still open, at the plow that had been declared illegal by a committee with dry shoes and warm cars. My phone rang again. "Wah, President." I let it ring until it stopped. The storm was still raging, and the road behind me was still barely passable. One rescue didn't change the weather. I raised the plow and turned back toward the uncut drifts, knowing the real fight wasn't against snow. It was against what would come after the snow stopped. Tomorrow would demand explanations, meetings, and consequences nobody wanted after that. When the storm finally loosened its grip, the street looked like a battlefield after a quiet war. My tracks were the only lines through the white, proof that one truck had fought the night. By morning, messages poured in. Parents thanked me. The bus driver left a voicemail full of breath and relief. And the HOA posted a notice: emergency use of unauthorized equipment under review. At the afternoon meeting, the room smelled of wet coats and coffee. The president read from the bylaws as if they were scripture. I listened, hands folded, while neighbors shifted in their chairs. They spoke about aesthetics, about liability, about setting precedents. I spoke about minutes, about heaters failing, about children waiting in a metal box while wind pressed against glass. Silence followed. Then a woman stood and said she had watched from her porch. She described the bus sliding, the police car stuck, the moment my headlights appeared. Others nodded. A man admitted he had voted against my plow because it was loud. Another said she assumed the city would handle storms like this. Assumptions, it turned out, were heavier than snow. The vote was close. 3 wanted to fine me. 4 wanted to thank me. The tie belonged to the president, who cleared his throat and stared at the table. Outside, the plowed path was already fading under new flakes. Inside, the choice was about more than a rule. It was about who we were when the weather made a demand. He finally said the fine would be waived and the rule reconsidered. No applause, just a shared exhale. I walked home with boots wet and shoulders lighter, knowing winter would test us again. That night, I parked the truck in the garage and wiped the blade clean. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a neighbor who had learned the cost of waiting for permission. The storm had shown us the gap between policy and people, and the bus had crossed it. By morning, a new sign appeared on the bulletin board: volunteers needed for snow response. Names filled the page. Someone added mine at the top. I left it there. Later that week, we painted reflective markers along the curb and stored shovels in a shared shed. A schedule went up with sunrise times and phone numbers. Even the president signed up for Tuesday mornings. Preparation felt ordinary, but ordinary things lives when storms stop being stories and start being instructions. We learned that winter listens only to action, and action grows when neighbors choose responsibility together without waiting for permission. Winter kept coming, but the street kept moving. And every time the wind rose, I remembered the moment the rulebook met the blizzard and blinked first. When the next storm arrived, it tested more than our new plan. Forecasts warned of ice beneath snow, the kind that turns tires into skates. At dawn, volunteers gathered with thermoses and radios. I led the first pass, carving a channel while 2 neighbors shoveled corners and another spread salt. The system worked until a fallen branch blocked the south turn. We cleared it by hand, laughing at the cold and at ourselves. Cars crept out, cautious but moving. The bus came later, slower, horn giving a small salute. Parents waved from porches like it was a parade. By afternoon, the HOA sent a memo thanking community responders. It felt strange seeing those words after the last storm's threat. Rules hadn't vanished, but they had learned a new language, exceptions written in boot prints. Not everyone approved. A man at the mailbox said we were risking lawsuits. A woman worried about noise. I listened, then pointed to the road. Risk lives here too, I said. He shrugged. She sighed. Winter doesn't negotiate. That night, freezing rain coated everything in glass. Power flickered. I kept the radio on and the keys by the door. At midnight, a call came from the bus garage. One route was stuck beyond the hill. I rolled out alone, lights low, blade angled. Ice fought harder than snow. The truck slid sideways before finding grip. I breathed, eased the throttle, and worked the hill in small bites. At the crest, the bus waited, engine whining. I cleared a path and waved it through, heart thumping louder than the wind. When I got home, dawn was bruising the sky purple. My hands shook from cold and adrenaline. On the porch sat a paper bag with coffee and a note, for the plow guy. Thank you for the kids. I pinned the note to the garage wall beside the old warning letter from the HOA. 2 pieces of paper, 2 kinds of authority. One told me what I couldn't do. The other told me why I should. After that week, we held a short drill, practicing hand signals and safe distances, teaching teenagers how to shovel corners and adults how to check on elders. The siren tests felt silly, but coordination turned fear into routine. Prepared streets make brave choices easier every winter. Stories travel faster than trucks. By the weekend, the local paper called. They asked about rules and storms and the night the bus was freed. I told them about neighbors learning to act before asking. They printed a photo of the road, clean and bright under sun, as if winter had agreed to leave evidence. We didn't become famous. We became ready. And readiness, I learned, is the quiet hero that never waits for applause. Chapter 5. Spring came late, dragging slush behind it, but the lessons stayed. We met in the community room to rewrite the rule about equipment, trading stiff phrases for plain ones. Instead of banning tools, we listed safety checks and training hours. Instead of fines, we added call trees and backup drivers. The president read the new draft aloud and asked for objections. None came. People had seen what frozen minutes look like, and they did not want to pay that price again. When the vote passed, the room sounded different, like boots finally coming off after a long day. Relief spread quietly across tired faces. We knew winter would return. But now we were ready. Together, news of our change traveled to nearby blocks, and a small network formed. One family offered a heated garage for storing salt. Another mapped shaded corners where ice lingered longest. I trained 3 volunteers on the blade angles and the slow dance of throttle and brake. On the first warm Saturday, kids chalked arrows on the pavement showing safe turns for buses. It looked playful, but it worked. Routes shortened, skids vanished, complaints faded, preparation became a habit, and habit became pride. Even skeptics started carrying shovels in their trunks. The street learned to think ahead, not react. That shift felt bigger than any storm. It changed how we saw responsibility. For everyone, everywhere, daily. The bus driver visited one evening with a box of drawings. Crayons showed my truck like a dragon pushing clouds aside, children waving from bright windows. I pinned them beside the coffee note and the old warning letter, a timeline of fear turning into trust. The driver said the kids now watched the weather app like a storybook, pointing at blue and white and asking if the plow would come. I told her the plow would come, but more importantly, neighbors would. She laughed and said routine is a kind of magic. Magic looks like work when storms arrive. Work keeps small promises alive. Alive means warm buses and open roads. For winter. Always. Now. Years later, a blizzard made the news again, but this time for a different reason. Reporters filmed a convoy of volunteers guiding the morning route through clean lanes while plows hummed in steady lines. They asked me about the night the rules were broken. I said rules can bend without breaking when they serve people first. I said storms teach communities their true shapes. Ours looked like a road kept open by hands that had learned to move together. Every winter since has been a rehearsal for care. Care is loud in engines and quiet in plans. Plans save minutes, and minutes save lives. We keep the blade ready all year. Just in case. Forever. Chapter 6. The memory of that first rescue never left me, but it changed shape over time. What once felt like defiance began to feel like duty. Each winter, before the first snow, I checked the bolts on the plow and tested the radio. The street learned to prepare early, but preparation also brought new pressure. People assumed I would always be there, always ready, always willing. Responsibility can be as heavy as a drift when it settles quietly on one pair of shoulders. One December morning, the storm arrived faster than the forecast promised. I was halfway across town, helping a friend jump a dead battery, when the phone rang. A bus was stuck near the creek bridge, and traffic behind it had turned into a line of blinking red lights. I turned around and drove straight into the wind, feeling the old mix of urgency and doubt. Being needed is powerful, being expected is different. The bridge was narrow, and the snow piled high against the rail. The bus couldn't move forward or back. Parents waited in cars, engines running, watching their breath fog the windows. I cleared a path inch by inch, pushing snow into the riverbank and carving a narrow escape. When the bus rolled free, a woman stepped out of her car and hugged me without asking. I stood there, stiff and cold, realizing the street now trusted me the way people trust gravity. That night, I told the volunteers we needed more drivers. I said one truck should never be the only answer. We added 2 backups and practiced swapping routes if someone was stuck at work or sick. The plan grew like a map drawn in pencil, ready to change. Sharing the load felt like setting down a weight I hadn't noticed I was carrying. The next storm proved the point. I broke a hydraulic line halfway through a run, the blade dropping uselessly to the road. 10 minutes later, another truck took my place. The route finished on time. The bus passed, horn soft and steady. Failure became a lesson instead of a crisis. People think hero stories end with applause. Ours ended with schedules and spare parts and hands raised at meetings. It ended with names on a list and radios on chargers and boots by doors. The storm still came, but it met a system instead of a single man. I kept the plow, but I also learned to step back and watch others step forward. The road stayed open, and so did the future. Chapter 7. The winter the blizzard of record arrived, our system faced its hardest test. Snow fell sideways for 30 hours, piling against doors and burying signs. Radios crackled with short, careful sentences. Routes closed and reopened like lungs breathing. We worked in pairs, one plowing, one spotting hazards hidden under drifts. The creek bridge vanished under a white ridge, and the hill near the school turned into a slide. At dawn, the call came that every driver fears. A bus had lost traction near the old quarry road, where wind sculpts traps out of nothing. I drove with a backup truck behind me, lights low, engine steady. The drift looked like a wall. We took it in layers, shaving and pushing, stopping to check the engine temperature and the driver's face. Children waited inside with blankets from the emergency kit we had packed months before. Preparedness has a smell, like coffee and clean gloves. When the bus moved, cheers traveled through the radio. The convoy guided it past the quarry and down toward the cleared main street. Parents appeared in doorways, some crying, some waving. The storm did not slow, but fear did. Later, when the roads finally slept, we met in the shed and wrote down what broke and what held. 2 radios failed. One route was too long. The salt ran low. We fixed the list before the next forecast arrived. Learning is faster when the stakes are cold. A week after the blizzard, the city council invited us to speak. They asked how a small block had kept buses moving when larger roads closed. I said we didn't wait for a perfect plan. We built a useful one and kept building. I said rules should protect people, not pictures. I said storms reward neighbors who practice care. They changed a policy that night, allowing community plows to assist school routes under clear safety terms. It felt like watching a door open that had been painted shut for years. The story had traveled from a single driveway to a room with microphones, carried by snow and time. I went home and cleaned the blade. The drawing still hung on the wall. The warning letter had curled at the edges. The coffee note had faded. Together they looked like seasons. Outside, the road was clear. Inside, the work was done, for now. Winter will return. It always does. But it returns to a street that learned how to answer. Next year, new volunteers will learn the same routes, the same signals, and the same patience, so the story continues without a single name at its center, only a shared promise to keep wheels turning and windows warm. That is how communities outlive storms and rules together forever after this night. Chapter 8. Years passed, and the storm that once defined us became a story told to newcomers when the first flakes fell. They would ask why the shed had radios and why the curb had reflective paint, and someone would point to the bend near the creek and say, because a bus once stopped there. Memory turned into maintenance. Maintenance turned into culture. We checked routes in autumn and replaced salt before it clumped. We practiced hand signals in daylight so night wouldn't invent mistakes. The work looked boring, which meant it was working. One winter, a new HOA board arrived with fresh binders and old instincts. They questioned the shed, the schedule, the noise. A proposal appeared to restrict volunteer plowing to daylight hours only. At the meeting, I watched faces tighten. We had seen what dark storms do. I raised my hand and told the short version of the first night, the rule, the call, the bus. Then the bus driver stood and told the long version, with pauses where children had waited and where engines had cooled. Parents followed with details that felt like weather reports, minutes, temperatures, distances. The board listened. The proposal died quietly, replaced by a clause that named the route to the school as a priority corridor, day or night. It was a small sentence with a large shadow. That winter's storms were mild, but the habits held. When a delivery truck slid near the hill, 2 volunteers arrived before a tow could turn around. When the power went out, the shed lights ran on a generator, and coffee appeared like a ritual. We learned that resilience is a chain of ordinary acts, linked before emergencies ask for them. On the anniversary of the first rescue, the kids from that bus returned.
If you enjoyed the, don't forget to subscribe to Karen Universe, share with your friends and drop your thoughts in the comments.